Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Both those in the sanctuary and those on Zoom. Just to let everyone know what's going to happen, you were probably expecting to see Vince. Some of you may see Vince on Zoom because we're attempting to have him provide the music. Unfortunately, he tested positive for COVID, so obviously he can't be in the sanctuary. So he's at home going to do singing. Before we start, I would just like to tell everyone on Zoom what we can see here, which is approximately 100 boxes of supplies boxed up to go to Ukraine. So they're ready to be loaded, I think, on Monday, and
started to be loaded on Monday.
Started to be loaded on Monday and making their way to Ukraine. And this represents contributions from this congregation, from the neighborhood. I understand that there's a contribution from some prisoners, a school. All sorts of people have contributed to this. So I think, well, it's going to make me cry, or it makes me cry. Sad things, happy things, but it's wonderful that we're doing this. So we'll begin this morning on page 105, Motto Blue.
Atovu, Atovu, O Alecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael, Matovu, Matovu, O Alecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. Ani barochastecha, avo vetecha, eshtachave el heichal kodechecha, v'yiratecha. Adonai ahavti, me'on vetecha, u'makom mishkan kavodecha, mishkan kavodecha. Ani eshtachave v'ekra evracha lifnei Adonai osi. Ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim baruch hasdecha Elohim baruch hasdecha, Ameini be'emet yishecha. Ma tovu, O Alecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael.
As we say the prayers of our ancestors, help us, O God, to remember their faith and devotion, their joy and suffering, and make us worthy of our heritage. May the tradition we have received live in us and pass from us to generations we shall never know, enriched by the truth we have found and the good we have done. So may we fulfill our task on earth and receive our destiny. We continue together on the top of page 106. Eternal God, school us in your teachings, and make us loyal to your commandments. May we never consent to evil or surrender to temptation, self-content. Help us to rise above selfishness and make us responsible to the voice of conscience. Direct our every impulse to your service. Today and every day, may we bear kindness and compassion in your sight, and in the sight of all who behold us. And let us show your love. We praise you, O God, for the love you gave us. At the dawn I seek you, my sole refuge, rock and guide. Set my prayer before you in the morning. Worship you at eventide. Now before your greatness do I stand in awe and fear. All the thoughts that in my heart are hidden, your seeing eye are clear. What, however, is it human heart and tongue can do? What is this, my strength? And what within me is my spirit before you? Yet it gives you pleasure when your children sing your praise. Therefore, while your spirit dwells within me, I will thank you all my days. Baruch Shemar B'Haya Haolam Baruch Hu Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam HaMecholal B'Fi Amo Meshubach Mefuar B'Lashon Chasidav B'Yadadav Kishverot Yizmerot Megadelacha V'Namlicha Malkeinu Yachid Hei HaOlamim Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mecholal Tishbachot.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, Od Yalelucha Selah, Ashrei Ha Shekachalo, Ashrei Ha She'Adonai Eloha.
We continue reading Psalm 145 responsibly. It's an alphabetic acrostic, by the way, in case you haven't noticed. Always I will exalt you, my sovereign God,
and praise your name forever.
beginning each day with praise.
I will extol your name forever.
Cause us to see your greatnesses beyond us,
Eternal one, forever to be praised.
declaring your works to each generation,
We bear witness to your mighty acts.
even as they speak of your splendor.
So I will meditate on your wonderful deeds.
For as they tell of your awesome might,
So I will regard your greatness.
great is your goodness which they celebrate.
As they sing your righteousness.
Holiness in your grace and compassion,
Your patience and abounding in love.
in your goodness, eternal God.
With your mercy and all your creatures.
Joyfully your work shall thank you,
And the faithful one shall praise you.
knowing how great is your majesty.
And the calling in your heart.
Let all humanity perceive your power.
And the works and every redemption.
Mighty is your rule and everlasting.
Your reign endures in all generations.
O God, you support the falling,
And raise up all who have bowed down.
pleading all look and hope to you.
And you give them their food in due season.
Quietly you open your hand.
And satisfy the needs of every living creature.
Righteous are you in all your ways.
And loving in all your deeds.
So near are you to all who call upon you.
To all who call on you in truth.
The desire of those who revere you, you fulfill.
You hear their cry and help them.
Unceasingly our lips shall sing God's praise.
So may all creatures know God's holy name forever.
ואנחנו נברך יה את עבד עולם, הללויה.
We rise and we turn to page 135 for your Shabbat. Yishtabah Shemcha Ad Malkeinu, Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz, Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avoteinu, Shir U'Shvacha Hallel V'Zimra, Berachot V'Chodoot Ve'Ata V'Yad Olam, Baruch Atah Adonai, Avocher V'Shirei V'Zimra.
ברכו את אדוני ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Can we resume our seats? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or u'borei choshech, osei shalom u'borei et hakol. Hame'er la'aretz v'ledarem alecha b'rachamim, u'tuvo mechadesh b'kol yom tamid, ma'aseh b'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, v'la ha'aretz kinyanecha, tikbarach Adonai Eloheinu asher ma'aseh yadecha b'yal me'orei or she'asita v'fa'arucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai yotzei amero. Let's continue together. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you and you taught them the laws of God. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you, and we rise for the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. V'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher anochi etzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha v'vitecha u'vlechtecha b'derech u'shoftecha u'kumecha u'kshatam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu le'totafot me'eninecha u'ktavtam al mezuzot be'techa u'visherecha. And we can resume our seats and continue with Lema'an.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, הייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני Adonai Elohim.
We continue together. Good and beautiful and true, sound, established, and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are a sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
Micha mocha Elim Adonai, Micha mocha Nedav HaKodesh Nora, Tehilot, Hosei, Beleh, Nora, Tehilot, Hosei, Beleh.
שירה חדשה שבכל גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם, הודו והמליכו ואמרו.
Adonai Imlo, Leolam Vaed. Adonai Imlo, Leolam Vaed. To Israel, Esrat Israel, Aleinu, Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kadosh Israel, Baruch atah Adonai, Kol Israel, Kol Israel, Israel.
And on page 140, we rise for the tefillah, standing prayer.
Adonai, Stefatai Tifta, Ufi Yagi Tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chazdei Avot v'Imachot, V'Mevi Gula Livnei V'neihem, L'Ma'an Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Machayei Metim Atah, Ra Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach, U'Morid HaGeshem, Mazriach HaShemesh, U'Morid HaTal.
Achachel Chaim Bechesed, Machayei Mekim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim B'Rofei Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mechayem Emuneto, L'Shein Me'afar, Michamocha Ba'Gevorot, U'Midom Elach, Melech Me'imit U'Mechayem, U'Matzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'hachayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Machayei hametim. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, V'shem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom, K'katuv al yad nevi'echa, al yad nevi'echa. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Melech haaretz, Kevodo. God's glory fills the universe. Baruch Avod Adonai B'Mkomo. From your concealment, majestic one, reveal yourself and rule over us, for you are our hope. Yimloch Adonai Le'olam, Elohai Tzion, L'dov Adon. Hallelujah. Adon, Adon, Adon. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושת נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול, כי אל מלך גדול, וחדש אתה. Adom, 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 Agidon Lecha, Ulanetzach Netzachim, Ulanetzach Netzachim, Kedushat HaNakdish.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. We can resume our seats. And we continue together. You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good.
Yismachu b'malchutecha, Yismachu b'malchutecha, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg, Amakatshei Shavi, Amakatshei Shavi, Kulam Yisrael, V'yitangu mituvecha, V'hashvi, V'hashvi, Ratzita bo v'kidashto, Emdat yamim, Oto karata, Zechel amaste v'reishit.
We continue together. Our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, eternal one, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath.
Adonai Eloheinu, Amcha Yisrael, U'tefilatam ba'avat techaber, U'te'il ratzon, Amid avodat Yisrael, Amecha, Yisrael Amecha, Baruch atah Adonai, She'otecha levadecha, V'yirah Naor.
We continue together in the middle of page 144. We give thanks that you, Eternal One, are our God, as you were the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives, which are in your hand, for our souls, which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due.
Shalom, Tova Uracha. Sim Shalom, Tova Uracha. Vein v'chesed v'rachamim. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael Amecha. Sim Shalom. Aleinu v'al kol yoshvei tevel. Sim Shalom. Sim Shalom, Tova Uracha. Sim Shalom, Tova Uracha. Hey, Chesed, V'rachamim.
As a loving parent, bless us with the light of your presence. For by the light of your presence, eternal God, you have revealed to us the law of life, a love of kindness and righteousness, blessing and mercy, life and peace. For it is good in your sight that your people Israel and all peoples be blessed at all times with your gift of peace. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. We take some time now for our own silent prayers and thoughts.
L'aratzon imreifi, v'egion libi lefanecha. Lefanecha Adonai suri, suri v'goali. Osei shalom bimroma, uyasei shalom. Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel.
We continue with the service with our Torah reading on page 490. And I'm going to need some people. And I've already got, I've already asked one of them, because I can't even lift that scroll out because of my deaf wrist. So I need two more people to do some ark opening and some, yes, please. Do come. Thank you, Stephanie. That's great. So, Chel et ha'am, assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities, to hear and learn to revere the Eternal One, your God, and observe faithfully all the precepts of this Torah, and that their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere the Eternal One, your God. And we rise. as the ark is opened.
V'ha'edneinu v'toratecha v'dabech leinu v'mitzvotecha v'yachet v'lavenu v'yahava u'yira et shemecha.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai Iti, Uneromema Shemo Yachtal.
Adonai HaGadol HaGavor HaTiferet v'hanetzach v'hachod Tichol b'shamayim u'aretz Tichol b'shamayim u'aretz L'cha Adonai HaMamlecha v'hamitnaseh l'chol erod.
You can sit down now. The scroll is seated. You may be seated. That's fine. We are reading today the very first section of Leviticus. Leviticus is an interesting book. I have to say, I quite like some of the bits of Leviticus. I'm not so keen on some of these opening portions, though. And what we're reading today is all about sacrifices. So not perhaps the most exciting section to be read, but nevertheless, that's what we're reading because that's what today's Torah reading is. So it's Leviticus chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. I need your Hebrew name. Mera. Mera bat. Okay. So Ta'amod. Mera bat Sarah Avraham al HaTorah. Which side do you want to be on? This side.
That's okay.
Because we're going to need you to sort of hold one part of it. So. Oh, yeah. Isn't something? Yep.
Baruch et Adonai Amvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Amvarach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayikra el Moshe, Vaydaber Adonai elav me'ochel moed, lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael, v'yamarta alehem. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban l'Adonai, min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, umin hatzon, takrivu et korbanechem, im ola korbano, min ha-bakar, zachar tamim yakrivenu el petach ochel moed, yakriv oto, lirtzono lifnei Adonai. V'samach yado al orosh ha'ola, v'nirtza lo lechaper alav, v'shachat et ben habakar lifnei Adonai, v'hikrivo b'nei Acharon hakohanim et hadam וזרקו את הדם על המזבח. סביב אשר פתח אוכל מועד, והפשיט את העולה, וניטה אתה this is another tongue twister. לנתחיך. ונתנו בני אהרון הכהן איש על המזבח, וערכו עצם על האש, וערכו בני אהרון הכהנים את הנתחים, את הראש ואת הפדר על העצים אשר על האש אשר על המזבח, ויקריבנו וקירב ירחץ במים, והקטיר הכהן את הכל המזבחה עולה אשר ריח נכוח לאדוני. And should we read the English bit?
Yeah, I can read it if you want me to.
Yeah, that's particularly enlightening, but
And the Eternal One called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when any of you presents an offering of cattle to the Eternal One, you shall choose your offering from the herd or from the flock. If your offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you shall make your offering a male without blemish. You shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of the meeting for acceptance in your behalf before the Eternal One. You shall lay a hand upon the head of the burnt offering, that it may be acceptable in your behalf, in expiation for you. The bull shall be slaughtered before the Eternal One, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall offer the blood, dashing the blood against all sides of the altar, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The burnt offering shall be flayed and cut up into sections. The son of Aaron the priest shall put fire on the altar and lay out wood upon the fire. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall lay out the sections with the head and the thread on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. Its entrails and legs shall be washed with water, and the priest shall turn the whole into smoke on the altar as a burnt offering, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Eternal One. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. So now I need somebody to actually lift the scroll, and I'm looking at you, Brian. I hope you ate your Wheaties this morning, and I need people to dress it again and open the ark. So can I get a couple of people? You said you didn't want to do Hagbah.
I don't want to do Hagbah. You did promise once that you were going to teach me how to do Hagbah, and you never did.
I will, actually. Teaching you I can do.
So at some point you need to teach me.
I'll get out of your way. And then hope.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu v'hakodsho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu
that all put together. I'm assuming you did stand up when it was lifted because I forgot to tell you, but if you didn't, no worries. We are going to have a Haftara today, and Joyce is going to read it for us. And I'm going to explain that this is not the regular Haftara. Today is the Shabbat before Purim, and it's called Shabbat Zachor. And ordinarily, the Haftara to be read would be, microphone. It is a bit that reminds us to blot out Amalek. And I don't particularly, it like goes over and above, and I think it becomes more vengeance than justice, and I'm a bit bothered by that. Just like I'm a bit bothered by the very ending of the Megillah, where I think it's all giving people the right to defend themselves, which I'm going to be talking about in my sermon, which the Megillah does, but then the last couple of chapters, which we have a tendency to gloss over, actually seem to be less defense and more vengeance. And I think that's something to be a bit careful about. So what I've actually chosen today is a Haftarah that does tie in with these burnt offerings, which we don't do anymore because we think that that's not how we worship God and that God doesn't want our burnt offerings. So I'm going to now be quiet and let Joyce read.
We praise you, Eternal One, our God, sovereign of the universe. You inspired faithful prophets and took pleasure in the words they spoke in truth. We praise you, O God, for the gift of Torah, your servant Moses, your people Israel, and the prophets of truth and righteousness. Thus says the Eternal One, the sovereign God of heaven's hosts, there shall be wailing in the squares, cries of woe in the boulevards. Farmers shall be called to mourn, and the experts in lamentation to wail. And there shall be mourning in every vineyard when I pass through your midst, says the Eternal One. Are you hoping for the day of the Eternal? What good will that day do you, if it is darkness, not light? It is like running from a lion, only to be met by a bear, like escaping into a house and leaning one's hand against the wall, only to be bitten by a snake. Be sure of it. The eternal God's day is darkness, not light, shrouded in gloom, without a gleam of light. I reject your feast days, says God. I take no pleasure in the scent of your solemn assemblies. When you bring me burnt offerings of grain, I will not accept them. I will not look with favor upon your fatlings. Spare me your noisy songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. We praise you, Eternal One, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have been our source of strength and righteousness throughout the ages, the faithful God whose word is deed, whose every word is true and just.
Thank you. This is from the prophet Amos, and the way we look at prophets is not, within Judaism, is not someone who can tell the future, but someone whose job is to warn the people, to warn them about what might happen if they keep going on their path. And so that's, in effect, what Amos is doing, is warning the people about maybe attention to minutiae and forgetting the big picture, thinking that they're great when they're actually mistreating people, when they've lost the thought of justice and fairness, and warning them that, you're on the wrong path, shape up. Don't just give me burnt offerings and think that's going to make me happy. That's not the way to live. I'm very fond of Amos. But I think Joyce actually reminded me a couple of times that we do say that we're a prophetic tradition and that we try to use the prophets to think about our own day as well. And I do think that that's important. And one of the things we learned in rabbinic school is that as part of that prophetic tradition, we sometimes need to kind of speak out against injustice, that it's not right to just go, oh, well, everything is wonderful and God will save us, but that we have to speak up and we have to act and do our best to create that world that we want to live in. And that's not my sermon, but that's just my commentary on the Torah reading and the Haftara. So we rise now for our community prayers. And since these are community prayers, I'd like us to join together in them. Eternal God, we're on page 493. That would help. Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, acceptance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel who enter synagogues to pray and to give aid to those in need. May the Holy One, to whom all praise is due, hear their prayers and help them to fulfill their aspirations for good. And just like to say that at least I'm thinking particularly of all of those members of the 40 progressive congregations in Ukraine, and of all of those congregants in all of the different congregations in Lithuania, in Poland, well, I could go on and on and on, couldn't I? In the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, who are welcoming refugees, who are really helping hands-on those in need. So I think we add our prayers to theirs, and we pray for them as well. And we continue. Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbors, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. Yahalelu et Shem Adonai ki nizgav shemo levado.
Odo al eretz v'shamayim v'yarem keren le'amo v'hila chol chazida lifnei Israel am krovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in time to come, says the Eternal One. I will put my teaching within them and engrave it on their hearts. I will be their gods, and they shall be my people. No longer shall anyone need to teach a friend or a neighbor to know me, for they all shall know me, young and old alike.
Ashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashua Kadesh Yameinu Echeret Kadesh Yameinu Echeret
say we're the people of the book, and in my case, it appears to be the person of many books. I've got about 5 of them down here. Well, I can honestly say that this is a sermon I never really thought I would have to give. To preach a sermon as a brutal war was being waged just a few hours plane ride away. This was definitely not on my radar. Not that I haven't been around through more than a few wars and remember some that I've been rather vociferously opposed to, such as the Vietnam War, and remembered the horror of watching on the news as Russian tanks rolled down the streets of Prague, and earlier than that into Hungary, the Soviet Union times. But I guess I hoped that at least as far, I mean, we've still had wars, because I've also, obviously, with all the work I've done with refugees, witnessed the horror perpetrated in Syria, and the absolute carpet bombing and destruction of Aleppo, and the civil wars raging in Yemen and Eritrea. But although I've preached about those things in some ways, not quite in the same way as I think this has hit me. I found the events of the last couple of weeks both horrifying and horrifyingly familiar. As I listened to Putin's rhetoric denying his plans for the forces that he was massing on Russia's border with Ukraine, as well as what was being based in Belarus, I was reminded of the events of quite a few years earlier, of sort of the 1930s, 1939. And some of you who are my Facebook friends might have seen that I posted, I shared a picture which had been decolored of the people leaving on sort of mobbing a train station in black and white, and it looked, from just a few days ago, it looked for all the world like 1939. And I came across a sermon by a rabbi called Abraham Feinberg. This is the beginning of his sermon of Rosh Hashanah in 1939. He was the rabbi of Temple Beit El in Rockford, Illinois, an American rabbi. And I'm just going to read you this and see if how you feel about it, because it certainly hit me as being all too pertinent. If you changed some of the names, the situations that he's describing are very familiar, and the dates, of course. As early as 1934, only a year after Hitler seized power, the Polish Premier Marshal Pilsudski saw the inevitable consequences of Nazi rearmament and urged France then, on the grounds of treaty breaking, to wage a preventive war, a war which would have been less of a disaster than a police skirmish and would have incidentally crushed Hitlerism. Writers and observers of repute likewise presented incontrovertible evidence of the diabolical intentions of the new Nazi regime. Even more convincing had been the many lying tantrums of the German Führer himself. In a speech of May 21, 1935, he said, "Germany has neither the wish nor the intention to mix in Austrian internal affairs, or annex, or unite with Austria." Less than 3 years later, in Berchtesgaden, he told Schuschnigg, "What's all this nonsense about your independence?" In a speech delivered in March of 1936, he said, "Czechoslovakia, like Poland, always primarily followed the policy of representing its own national interests. Germany does not desire to attack these states. In a speech of September 1938, just before the Czechoslovak state was destroyed, this promise was solemnly given. If this problem, the Sudeten crisis, is solved, there will be no further territorial problems in Europe for Germany. Storm signals, therefore, had been hoisted again and again. Reveilles of warning were being sounded hourly. Why then did the world of decent men slumber until the strength of morning had passed? Perhaps the statesmanship of Europe was headless and inept. Perhaps Europe's civilized human beings could not conceive the reenactment of hostility and bloodshed. Perhaps they had grown weary of the world's noise and clamor and sought mental repose on the mystic couch of James Hilton's imaginary Shangri-La. Who knows what forces or combination of forces dulled the minds of Europe's civilization that had allowed the vulture in their midst to wax fat and grow mighty in strength. The fact is that that vulture has risen, and his outstretched flapping wings will obscure for many days to come the light of earthly sanity. I read that, and it just struck me as all too real, all too prescient, all too similar to what we've heard today. Now, what does Judaism have to say about war? Clearly, the ideal and the hope is for a time when everyone can sit under their own vine and fig tree, a time when weapons will be beaten into plowshares. But defensive war has always been permitted. Much of the discussion of the conduct of war derives from the prohibition in Deuteronomy 20, verses 19 and 20, of destroying fruit-bearing trees in the environs of a besieged city. The principal points deal with the issue of wanton destruction and the immunity of the non-combatant. The philosopher Philo extends the prohibition against axing fruit-bearing trees to include vandalizing the whole environs of the besieged city. Indeed, so great a love for justice does the law instill in those who live under its constitution that it does not even permit the fertile soil of a hostile city to be outraged by devastation or by cutting down trees to destroy the fruits. Josephus expanded on the prohibition to include the incineration of the enemy's country and the killing of animals employed in labor. Despoiling the countryside without direct military advantage comes under the proscription of profligate destruction. Maimonides moved a step further, extending the prohibition to exclude all wanton destruction. Also, one who smashes household goods, tears clothes, demolishes a building, stops up a spring, or destroys articles of food with destructive intent transgresses the command, "You shall not destroy." The concern with the humanity of the enemy is also a significant issue. Referring to Deuteronomy 21, verse 10 and the following, Josephus says, "The legislator of the Jews commands showing consideration even to declared enemies." He forbids even the spoiling of fallen combatants. He has taken measures to prevent outrage to prisoners of war, especially women. And what he's referring to here are God's words that we find in Torah and in the commentaries. Apparently reflecting a similar sensibility, Rabbi Joshua claimed that his biblical namesake took pains to prevent the disfigurement of fallen Amalekites, whereas David brought glory to Israel by giving burial to his enemies. Is this consideration for the humanity of the enemy that forms the basis of Philo's explanation for the biblical requirement in Numbers 31:19 of expiation for those who fought against Midian? He writes, "For though the slaughter of enemies is lawful, yet one who kills a man, even if he does so justly and in self-defense and under compulsion, has something to answer for in view of the primal common kinship of mankind. And therefore purification was needed for the slayers to absolve them from what was held to have been a pollution." According to the Maharal of Prague, Jewish law forbids the killing of innocent people, even in the course of a legitimate military engagement. There are times when evil has to be used to hold evil in check, however. The problem, as Rabbi Abraham Cook noted, is how to engage in evil without becoming evil. His solution requires even the righteous to be constantly involved in repentance. Similarly, Philo requires the rites of expiation. Since there is no war without evil, either because killing can never be deemed good or because war inevitably entails unnecessary killing, there's no war that doesn't require penance. And he argues that this explains why the slaying that ensued after the golden calf episode required acts of expiation. Martin Buber captured the ongoing dialectic between the demands of conscience and the exigency, I can't even pronounce the word that I've written today, of the hour. It is true that we are not able to live in perfect justice, and in order to preserve the community of man, we are often compelled to accept wrongs and decisions concerning the community. But what matters is that in every hour of decision, we are aware of our responsibility and summon our conscience to weigh exactly how much is necessary to preserve the community, and accept just so much and no more, that we may not interpret the demands of a will to power as a demand made by life itself, that we do not make a practice of setting aside a certain sphere in which God's commandments does not hold, but regard those actions as against his command, forced on us by the exigencies of the hour as painful sacrifices, that we do not salve or let others salve our conscience when we make decisions concerning public life. There's no doubt but what Ukraine has a right to defend itself, but what obligations do other countries have to help it? It's been repeated and repeated that neither soldiers nor planes can be given, nor a no-fly zone enforced. Yet, Ukraine is in the position it is vis-à-vis Russia because of a treaty that both the UK and the US were involved in. At the time of Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine held the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, including an estimated 1,900 strategic warheads, 176 intercontinental ballistic missiles, and 44 strategic bombers. In 1994, Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear weapons and turn them over to Russia. To solidify security commitments to Ukraine, the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom signed the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances on December 5, 1994. The treaty promised that Ukraine's sovereignty and existing borders would be respected. But what has happened? Putin made the first grab of Ukrainian territory in 2014, when Crimea and Sevastopol were annexed and Russian forces entered a couple of eastern regions. It was clear even then that it was going to want more, that Russia was going to want more, that Putin was going to want more. And hostilities have rumbled on in the eastern regions, which just a few weeks ago Putin announced he was formally annexing. The memorandum included security assurances against the threat or use of force against Ukraine's territory or political independence. Nothing was done in 2014, and I fear that that emboldened Putin. And I worry that he is confident that no other countries will enter to help Ukraine defend itself, despite the provisions of this treaty. Other countries in the area fear they will be next, as Putin tries to reestablish the old Soviet Union sphere of influence. I'm not feeling very dove-like at the moment, which is unusual for me. I think there's a time to take a stand, and this may well be it, if we are to avoid further devastation of Ukraine and incursion into other countries. The effect on other nearby countries is also becoming problematic. We've heard of the large number of refugees who have entered Poland. It's easy to gloss over the smaller number, but Moldova has accepted 100,000 refugees. Moldova is a very small country. This has increased its population by somewhere between 4 and 5%. It's akin to the UK having 2 million refugees turn up in 2 weeks. The impact on these other countries is absolutely massive. We know that Poland is running out of rooms and flats for people. Someone speaking last night on the news saying, they're doing their best, but basically every Airbnb is gone. Every empty flat that was up for rent has been taken by a Ukrainian refugee family. People are offering spare rooms, but they're literally out of spare rooms in their houses. One of my friends, the rabbi of the synagogue in Odessa, Rabbi Yulia, she and her daughter Isolda and their cats are living with a family now in Warsaw. They're just literally running out of space. And I did hear that there's a speed up of visas being granted by the UK. We seem to be something in the neighborhood of 1,500 visas granted so far. There's just got to be more. It's been good that, I think very good that various munitions, that anti-tank materials and such things have been given to Ukraine to help it fight. But I do find myself wondering if it's enough, and I wonder what Russia's next step will be. We already know what Putin is capable of doing because we saw what Putin did in Syria. As an ally of the Assad regime, the use of chemical weapons on the civilian population in Syria. I'm very worried. About what's going to be next, and I'm feeling a bit like the comments of this rabbi. Well, maybe we should have done something sooner. Maybe a stand should have been taken earlier. Maybe we could have stopped it in 2014, before my rabbinic colleague fled Simferopol with his family and for his life, and is now a rabbi in Slovakia. I'm not offering you answers, but I'm just offering you a lot of concern. We pray for peace, of course we do. But I think we also have to pray for the courage to resist tyrants when it's time to resist tyrants. And I hope desperately for peace in Ukraine, and I hope for the continued courage of those who are battling to save their land, to save Kyiv, to save the other cities, and putting themselves on the front line, those who have gone to join them. I heard that something in the neighborhood of 66,000 Ukrainians who were in other countries, perhaps studying or working, have returned to join the battle. Sadly, I also read that there are a number of conscripts from Syria, which Russia has brought in to increase its armed forces. There are no words in a time of war. There are no right words. There are only questions and anxiety and hopes and prayers that somehow the people in charge of everything figure out what the right thing is, and that we continue to push for things that we certainly can push for, like an enhanced reception of refugees, that we push for the continued deliverance of humanitarian supplies, both to Ukraine, but eventually I think there's going to have to be a lot of stuff provided to Poland to feed all those people. And we're also facing the situation that if Ukrainian farmers can't plant their crops, there's going to be a huge shortage of wheat and of food. coming up, especially for the adjacent areas who often relied on those crops. So, like I say, I've got no answers. I wish I did. But I think we have to be aware and we have to pay attention. We have to kind of think in our own hearts what's the right thing to do, and maybe start arguing with the government a bit about some things. And with that, we turn to page 519 as we rise. Say, Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen. Baruch Adonai Elohim, Elohei Yisrael, Osei Niflaot Levado. Ubaruch Shem Kavodo Leolam. Vayimale Kavodo et Kol Haaretz. Amen. Amen. The eternal God shall rule over all the earth. On that day, the eternal God shall be one and known to be one. May your love, O God, rest upon us as we rest our hope in you. All the nations that you have made shall come and bow down before you and honor your name. Let God be praised by day. Let God be praised by night. Let God be praised when we lie down. Let God be praised when we rise up. Our God in heaven, let your unity be acknowledged and your sovereignty established forever. Reign over us now and always. The eternal God reigns, has reigned, and will reign forever. And as we turn to the Kaddish, we remember this Shabbat, Sally Feldman, the mother of Karen Burgess and the mother-in-law of Ken Burgess. This is the 12th, isn't it? I somehow feel like I've lost a couple of weeks. Melvin Green, the husband of Helen Green. Morris Sayre, the husband of Irene Sayre. Milton Rothschild, the father of Ellen French. Norman Crevice, the father of Stephanie Woganig and grandfather of Joshua. David Kiverstein, father of Keith Kiverstein. For those whom we have named, for those who have lost their lives over the last couple of weeks, and for all those whose names we hold in our own hearts, and for those who have no one left to say Kaddish, we say together, Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, v'Alma Divrach Yerutei v'Yamlich Malchutei, v'Chayechon v'Yomechon, v'Chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael, v'Agalav Zman Kariv v'Imru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevorach v'Olam v'Almei Almaya. Yit Barach v'Yishtabach v'Yitpa'ar v'Yitramam v'Yitnatzeh v'Yithadar v'Yitalei v'Yitalal Shmei D'Kudusha v'Echu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tishbachata v'nechemata ta'amiran v'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shalom al Rabba min Shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom b'mrama hu yasei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol b'nei adam v'imru. Amen. May the source of strength who blessed the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And we're going to conclude with Gesher Tsar Me'od, which we'll find on page 201. Vince is still there, hasn't gone off
I'll
somewhere.
just read the English first on page 201. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, and the important thing is not to be afraid. And that's not a geographical statement, the whole world. It's kol ha'olam kulo. It's everything we face. Brings difficulties. It's like walking across a narrow bridge to get things done correctly. And the important way of surviving the challenge of walking across a narrow bridge is to not be afraid. Kol ha'olam kulo. Gesher Tsar Me'od, Gesher Tsar Me'od, כשסע מאוד, כל העולם כולו, כשסע מאוד, כשסע מאוד. והיכה לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל, והיכה לא לפחד כלל.
Somehow, we just have to get through it. And we have some announcements. Yes, we do. I wouldn't want to forget the announcements. Very important announcements.
Linda as well. Is Linda there? Linda, we're on.
And also remind you that Purim is coming up. And I know that we're invited to join on Thursday Rabbi Mark Solomon's communities for Purim Spiel and Megillah reading. And that also there's something here next Friday night, a Purim.
Who's your Jewish hero?
Havra. Who's your Jewish hero? Havra supper.
Yes, you have to come either dressed as your Jewish hero, if you're up for doing some fancy dress. If you're not quite up for doing the full outfit, then why not? But you can come as, you can bring an item associated with your Jewish hero and let other people guess who that Jewish hero may be. Okay, Linda, do you want to come up as well? I think Craig already showed on the live stream this is probably half of the boxes that we've managed to collect so far in just a week. It was only a week ago that I stood up here and announced our appeal, and it's been really quite overwhelming, the response. So thank you to everybody who's helped, who's donated. We are going to be open for at least another week. So the opening times are 12 to 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. every day.
6 to 8.
6 to 8, what did I say? 6 to 8 p.m. every day. We are looking for volunteers to be here to receive and help sort. For those of you who've already volunteered, thank you very much. I'll be sending out an email over the next 24 hours with the rota for this week. We're also looking for people who are strong to help load up the first truck. The first truck will be coming here Monday at noon, and we'll be loading things up and taking them on to Twickenham to be taken on to Ukraine. So anybody who can be here Monday at noon who's able to lug quite a lot of boxes, please let me know and be here then. And look out for more details in the newsletter. Please check the Facebook page and the Facebook group as well for more details of what you can do to help. Linda.
Just to add to that, can we have no more clothes, please, and no more bedding? We're prioritising. We really need water purification tablets. We don't have any. So if you can get your hands on, preferably through, I've been to the local pharmacist to see if we can get, I've had a donation of £40, in bulk. And if you ask a pharmacist, you may be able to get it at cost price as well. Also, we need all medical supplies, particularly painkillers, because you can only buy them as single packs generally. So we need people to keep bringing, every time they go to a pharmacist or the supermarket, just keep bringing them in would be great, thank you. Or if you know of a local GP or pharmacist, you could say, please could you hold back any returned medicines that are in date and unopened. That's also very useful. We've got some posters here which we've already done a fair amount of promotion through social media and locally through posters and word of mouth. We've emailed schools and community centres, etc. But we still have some posters here, and to be honest, the people who've been doing it up to till now are pretty much full-time packing. So if you live nearby or you go to anywhere near enough with high traffic area, we've got laminates, obviously that's really sort of for outdoor use, or we've got smaller indoor posters, double-sided. So if you could take any, if you think of somewhere, even a park gate, that you could use them. And also, we're struggling to pack up all the sleeping bags and duvets. We don't want any more duvets, but we will take more sleeping bags. If anyone can go to a pound shop and get a whole load of this type of zip bag, that would be really helpful. So, or if you've got any at home, that'd be great. Thank you.
Brilliant. So
I'll leave these here. So
yeah, great. Thank you, everyone.
More announcements? Be my guest.
First, a big thank you to Janet and Vince, who is holed up somewhere at home. We hope his symptoms continue to be mild and gets through unscathed, his COVID experience. A couple of things to add to everything else that's going on. On Monday morning, there is a tree planting. This is on behalf of the Association of Jewish Refugees, who are doing this across the country. This one is in association with Kingston Council. They are planting a tree. It's on the riverside. There's details in the bulletin. Renee, we're representing KLS, but you're welcome to come along too. It's at 11 o'clock. And also next weekend on Sunday is our spring walk, led by Philip Hyman, and it's going to be in the beautiful countryside of Ripley, the Way navigation, with some lunch as well, and the cafe outside Wisley. So do come along. Thank you.
And it just occurs to me, I've just watched Natalia walk in. One of my favorite things as a rabbi to do is to sit on Beit Din. And I did that on Thursday. And as a result of that, we have a new, fully fledged member of the congregation.
Thank you.
It was very, very lovely to sit on your Beit Din. It really was. I believe we have Kiddush somewhere. Maybe. Somewhat late. I think it's in the NFJ hall. Yeah, I do too.